Now, let's get some reaction from Canada's business community. Goldy Hyder, he's the president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. He joins me now. Mr. Hyder, good to see you again. Thanks for your time tonight. What's your assessment of this budget?
Right direction. Lots to do still in terms of the specifics, as always is the case in these budgets. I think we should be happy about the deficit coming down as much as it has. But we have to remember there still is a deficit, and it still is well into the 100 billion plus range. We've got a debt that we haven't begun to tackle as well. I think, Peter, we see elements of a plan here. There's lots of, we've been calling for a growth strategy and an actual growth plan. I think the elements are there. I'm hoping that we can work more collaboratively in a genuine spirit of partnership with government to actually execute on that plan. And much of it is focused on the climate, but also the innovation piece, which I think is key. And we were very pleased to see the investment in defense. We called for it, and we said at the same time, please do a program review to pay for it. And it looks like they listened, and they're going to be doing just that.
One of the big features is this Canada Growth Fund, newly created, $15 billion, hoping to leverage private investment for the green transformation. What do you think of that?
Well, look, I mean, this is certainly a signature item for this government and this prime minister, so it's not a surprise that there's an allocation of a $15 billion to bring down the emissions, to help build a low-carbon economy, and actually build a supply chain for critical minerals and batteries. So what I like about it is it's playing to our strengths. Our strengths are in natural resources, whether it's from mining or oil and gas or to even agriculture and so forth. So we like that aspect of it. It's more of a putting the emphasis on the innovation piece as opposed to the invention piece. And that's okay. Let's work together to do that. Because I think what Canadians know is that if we put our minds to it and we work in a spirit of collaboration, Canada can win. We can compete and we can win.
Sure.
And the business community can certainly be a big part of that.
It feels a little bit to a lot of people like modeled sort of on the infrastructure bank that was, not all that successful.
Yeah, I was going to say probably not the best comparison, given most have described that as comatose these days.
But the idea is, look, we'll create this fund of public money, and that'll help us leverage private money. $3 to 1 is the expectation. What concerns you about how successful this might or might not be?
There is a difference here. First of all, I'm happy to see that the infrastructure bank is being redirected towards the energy transition, because right now, as I said, it's not doing very much. But what's different about this, I think, is that it's arm's length. It's got clearly an arm's length approach there, and it's got a real reliance on a partnership with the private sector, whereas I think the infrastructure bank was really trying to work more with provincial governments and other governments to bring about transportation infrastructure, again, which it didn't do a very good job of so far. I think this will help work in a collaborative way with business, because you're going to want to take that $1 that government's putting in and you want to make it $3. And if you can do that, you can do a lot of good things from an innovation perspective, which of course ripples into the job creation aspect of the economy as well.
Right. The government followed through on the NDP demand to slap a surtax on banks and insurance companies. What do you think of that?
Well, regrettable, because I think that that's really populist politics. It's short-term wins in a poll, but it's not good policy in the long run. And the reason for that is if you target a specific sector, every other sector says, am I next? And at a time in which we're trying to attract investment into the country, we should not have been sending that signal. I understand the politics behind it, Peter, but it's bad policy. What we should have done is said, look, we haven't had a tax review in this country since the Prime Minister was born. Why don't we do that instead and find out where there are opportunities to generate that? Any kind of a tax and spend agenda specifically targeted that way, I think it sends the wrong signal. It's unfortunate because, as I said, I want to be positive about many of the things that have been done right here, but on the tax and spend side, and frankly on the fiscal anchor side as well, it's not the way that I would have suggested that they go about it.
What should they have done?
Well, we would have preferred that they put the fiscal anchor on the take a look at the amount of spending that's taking place on the borrowing cost, the interest being paid on that deficit, and measure it against your revenues, which would have been much more fair in an environment when really, the nominal GDP growth that we've enjoyed is really spurned from the stimulus that the government spent in the pandemic, the oil boom that we had in the commodities, and of course the inflation all of that created gives you a much better picture, a rosier picture on the deficit to debt than if we take this approach, what's called the David Dodge model. Look at how much you're spending on borrowing costs as a percentage of revenue, because revenues could slow down, Peter. There is a risk here of an economic slowdown, partly because we're going to be raising rates, but also because of what's going on with COVID and the war.
Quickly about the investment tax credit for business looking to develop carbon capture technologies. We got some of the details of that now. A 60% credit until 2030, as much as a 60% credit until 2030, then that gets cut in half after that. Will business welcome that, and will that spur them to move quickly to develop those technologies to reduce the effects of carbon emissions?
Well, business asked for it, so business certainly welcomes it. We, of course, ask for a higher percentage, but we understand that what's been given is fair, and I think that the industry will work collaboratively with government. It's a very important aspect of how, when business and government can work together to address a public policy issue of concern to Canadians and of all walks and stripes with climate change. And we can lead, Peter. I think what can happen here is we can actually build an industry around carbon capture and use that as a growth strategy in terms of being able to export that and help other countries bring down their emissions, which is actually a more important way in some ways of bringing down emissions, because Canada alone is just a very small fraction of global emissions.
All right, Goldy Hyder, thanks for your time tonight. Great to talk to you again, and we'll talk again soon, I hope. Take care.
Very well. Always good to see you, Peter. All the best.
You too. Take care.